Do you solemnly declare and affirm under the penalty
A rare window inside the Texas prison where Ghislaine Maxwell is serving 20 years for sex trafficking. The new video shows Maxwell appearing yesterday via video link in front of Congress in a closed-door meeting. For survivors, it was a moment for answers. Instead, this.
Ms. Maxwell, were you a close friend and confidant of Jeffrey Epstein?
I would like to answer your question, but on the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer this question and any related questions. I therefore invoke my right to silence. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right to silence. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right.
As expected, Maxwell exercised her right to the Fifth Amendment, meaning she can choose not to give evidence that may incriminate her. However, her lawyer said Maxwell would be prepared to speak fully and honestly if granted clemency by President Trump.
I'm going to have to assert my Fifth, Sixth and 14th Amendment rights, sir.
If it all sounds familiar, that's because it is. Survivors say it reinforces a pattern that they have long described from both Epstein and Maxwell: self-preservation over accountability.
Well, Ghislaine Maxwell certainly has critical information that would help us understand exactly, what happened and who was there at varying times. Some of that we've been able to piece together through the information from other witnesses, et cetera, but she was definitely at the center of this. The problem is she will never tell the truth.
Maxwell's appearance comes as Congress members criticised what they called the over-redacted Epstein files.
What I saw that bothered me were the names of at least 6 men that have been redacted that are likely incriminated by their inclusion in these files. What we're after is the men who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked women to. We want those names published.
It's been more than a week since the US Department of Justice released millions of videos, texts and emails in connection with the Epstein scandal, a drip feed of information exposing a mapping of men in power across the globe. And a pop star who severed ties with that world order. A mic drop moment as Grammy award-winning star Chappell Rowan, who sings about a safe place in hit Pink Pony Club, became the latest star to leave her agents after their founder, Casey Wasserman, was named in the Epstein files. Wasserman had exchanged flirtatious emails with Ghislaine Maxwell over 2 decades ago and has since said he deeply regrets it. From pop stars to politicians caught with their trousers down, the Epstein files have almost brought down the British government. And as tens of millions watched, the victims of Jeffrey Epstein had this message broadcast at the Super Bowl.
This girl deserves the truth.
Because she deserves the truth.
Using the most public platform to ask simply for the truth, while Maxwell used hers for silence and not for the first time. And joining me now to discuss all of this is Charlotte Proudman, barrister and campaigner specialising in violence against women and girls. Charlotte, thanks for joining us. I mean, what sort of message do you think this sends to survivors watching Ghislaine Maxwell on this very public stage, refusing to answer questions?
I think it's a real slap in the face for survivors who we know from the emails that have been disclosed have suffered some of the most horrendous, torturous events perhaps imaginable, from rape, sexual assault, deep forms of harm, that being girls and women. We know that Maxwell herself was involved in the trafficking of women, and yet here she is, one of the only people that we know has had a direct role in the abuses inflicted by Epstein and other very famous, powerful men, and refusing to provide any information.
Now, survivors say Maxwell's silence sort of reflects a pattern of self-preservation over accountability that they've seen time and time again. I mean, is that something you've seen, Charlotte?
Absolutely. I mean, we do tend to see where there have been abuses of power, that perpetrators will still focus on their own self-preservation and making sure that they won't be held accountable for any further crimes. But often what we tend to see sometimes is that perpetrators will hold others accountable and will suggest that they may not be responsible, but other people are. And what we see in the Maxwell cases, effectively not telling the world, certainly not survivors, who else is responsible.
Now, Congress has criticised the Epstein files for, in their words, being overly redacted. I mean, in your view, are these redactions protecting national security, as some claim, or are they protecting powerful individuals?
think one of the ironic things about the redactions is that we hear from victims that their privacy has been invaded because the files have not been appropriately redacted. So it's quite easy, I'm told, to get hold of victims' names, potentially their medical records, social security records, and so forth. And yet when it comes to perpetrators, we see that their names are redacted. Of course, not all of them, but very many of them are redacted. Now, what is the purpose of those redactions? Surely it can't be national security. And there is, in my view, and certainly what would outweigh that, is a public interest in holding those perpetrators accountable.
I mean, with your barrister's hat on, legally now, what are the routes, do you think, for survivors? We've seen that, you know, justice appears to have stopped with Maxwell. Are there other paths that they could pursue?
I mean, I would like to see those that have sent emails to Epstein who are directly implicated or indeed themselves have perpetrated sexual violence upon women and girls investigated by the police and by law enforcement agencies, whether that's in the UK or the US. For example, I think it would be only right that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is investigated by the police. Why hasn't he been investigated? Yet Mandelson, who supposedly leaked confidential information from the government to Epstein, a convicted paedophile at the time, has been investigated by the police. Why is it that survivors, and indeed their right to bodily integrity, to freedom of violence, are not taken as seriously? It just shows to me that the policing priorities are not right.
I mean, you talk of consequences, you know, from politicians to pop stars. We are seeing a sort of severing of ties after individuals are named in the files. I wonder, do you think that reputational pressure and damage can succeed where the justice system has failed?
I used to think so. I think particularly during the Me Too movement, I did think that reputational damage perhaps can sometimes outweigh and indeed perhaps even grapple with some of the challenges and barriers within the criminal justice system in terms of holding perpetrators accountable. However, what we saw post Me Too is that very many men were able to effectively embark upon a PR exercise of making sure that in some way their PR was rehabilitated.
Do you think things have progressed since the Me Too movement? You know, we talk about it as a kind of colossal moment, but seeing this sort of global mapping of power, are we moving in the right direction in your view?
I think incrementally there were some changes with the Me Too movement, but I also think there was a huge pushback, and perhaps one of the most powerful examples of that is the election of Donald Trump. It shows that when it comes to the public, that's views on morality, particularly violence against women and girls, I think there's still predominantly this sense of male entitlement that it's permissible for men to abuse women, I'm afraid to say, and for men not to be held accountable and certainly not suffer the career consequences that they perhaps should.
And just finally, you know, tens of millions of people were watching when Epstein's survivors used the Super Bowl to ask for the truth. Maxwell used her platform for silence. I mean, what message do you think that sends?
I think the fact that Maxwell has used her platform for absolute silence and to attempt to evade justice through her lawyer suggesting that she would only speak if she were granted absolute immunity is just extraordinary. It's not holding her accountable. Who knows if we'll hold anybody else accountable. There's not going to be any meaningful change unless perpetrators are held accountable. No one will have any confidence in the criminal justice system, I think, after this, when we see millions of pages of evidence and zero arrests.
Charlotte Proudman, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.